Now we look at some stories making headlines in North Africa, and we speak to journalist in Tunisia who's covering the North and Sahel region, Elizia Volkmann. Elizia, how are you on this 27th of June? Good morning.
Good morning. Great. Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Right. Let's start today with Morocco. NGOs there, or non-governmental organizations in Morocco, are warning against legal reforms. They're saying these proposed amendments to the criminal procedure would undermine efforts to combat corruption. What are these proposed amendments of the Code of Criminal Procedure?
The concern about the changes in the criminal code is sort of this is part of a trend that's been moving across North Africa, which is sort of narrowing the civil society space. We've seen in Algeria and Tunisia a real shutdown on civil society, freedom of speech. And the concern is that these laws are going to follow that same trend, which will narrow the activities of civil society, which will limit their proliferation, and this is deeply concerning. Ironically, Morocco, out of all the North African states, is probably advancing the most in terms of technology, in terms of development, and particularly in the major cities. We're seeing a real sort of growth in public services, in technology and transport, and particularly we're moving forward with international investment and growth of wealth in the country. That kind of sort of third-party oversight is very important. One of the things that sets Morocco apart from the other countries is that it is an executive monarchy. So there's already sort of been long-term concerns about how public money and state money is being used, or investments are being sort of siphoned off into the pockets of various members of the royal family. So that's the real sort of concern of the net effect of the legislation, is that there'll be, again, less oversight than there is before, and being a monarchical state, it's not been as it's not as sort of free as, say, we saw in the post sort of 2011 Tunisian state in the democratic transition years, where you saw this real proliferation of civil society, and that was actually led by anti-corruption NGOs.
So at this stage, the amendments have already been approved by the House of Representatives. What can the NGOs do then in recourse?
They can appeal, but the structure of the sort of introduction of a certain level of democracy in Morocco has never been sort of particularly sort of convincing. Back in sort of 2015, there was a sort of an enlargement of the democratic space. Certainly, Morocco in 2011, the revolution in Tunisia and in Libya really scared the hell out of the Moroccan king and the monarchical regime. And there were protests, and there was a fear at that time that there would be a similar type of sort of revolution, and they kind of really shut down. So their response at the time was to say, well, okay, we will try and sort of enlarge our sort of democracy. We'll have more of a parliament. We'll open up the space so that it's not 100% driven by the monarchy and executive monarchy, but what we've seen since there was a sort of enlargement of the parliament and the parliamentary process, But in recent years, it's incrementally narrowed, and it's not really there's sort of any transition towards a more democratic state has reduced and is not not particularly sort of convincing as any form of democratic transition, sadly. So there's in reality there's probably not an awful lot that they can do.
Yeah.
There can be legal recourses, but then demonstrations. But as we've seen with a lot of sort of the sort of public-driven movements and protests, that little changes, sadly.
And staying with Morocco, there's a UK Morocco energy project that's being rejected for a preference on a focus on local Moroccan projects. So this X-Links renewable energy project is worth £25 billion and would mean the UK imports solar and wind power from Morocco. What are the opportunities for Morocco, and do they outweigh the challenges with this deal?
Well, the X-Links project, what it was intended that one of the good things that Morocco has been investing in, and has really actually sort of become a real leader on, are renewable energies. Initially, the Noor power plant down in the Sahara, south of Ouarzazate in Morocco, was seen as a bit of a white elephant. But over the years, the project has expanded and grown, and with every sort of module of the project, the output and the potential output has grown. And we've even seen Morocco open a wave power plant off the Atlantic coast in the seaside resort of Essaouira. So they really have been pushing ahead with this, and given the potential of countries bordering the Sahara to produce solar energy, they're the only ones that have actually made any serious advances. So the Ed Miliband, the energy secretary, this project had been on pause since May. X-Links, they are a company who are would have been creating the cabling. So the project was meant to run from a cable running from the Sahara and under the sea, a really sort of advanced electrical cable, and it would have gone all the way around the Iberian Peninsula up towards Devon, which is in the southwest of England, and would have carried the supply. And the advances with undersea cabling now, it means that there's minimal loss, and that it's a much more sort of viable, long-reaching cables are much more viable. There are cables that are flowing between North Africa and over shorter distances, between sort of North Africa and Italy, for example. And we're seeing other sort of advances of other cabling projects, like the intended Medusa project, going from Europe towards Africa, which will be a sort of a mega broadband cable. So this would have been a real groundbreaking project. The Whitehall in the UK, the UK government, the word is that they've rejected this project in lieu of looking at more homegrown renewables. But it does sort of beg the question what the real reason is. One of the suspected reasons is actually concerns about global security, and certainly at the moment with the increased aggression in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, with the war in Gaza now expanding to Israel having targeted bombs over Iran and America following suit and bombing Iran. And of course, North Africa has deep sympathies for the people of Palestine. It does beg the question if there's actually concern about sort of a large, widening of the conflict or sort of instability. But X-Links they were saying that really this type of cabling, it's actually pretty secure. It's unlikely to be the target of terrorism, and that those concerns are perhaps unfounded. X-Links, which is it's headed up by the former director of Tesco, which Tesco's one of the largest supermarket chains in the UK.
Yeah.
They are obviously they're disappointed, but they are they're convinced that there will be other markets and other potential customers for this kind of cabling, and their approach is they're going to sort of dust themselves off and open negotiations for another client.
All right.
And to push ahead, yes.
All right, let's move to Tunisia. The Tunisia resort attacks are being remembered there where you are on the 10th anniversary since the incident took place. What do we remember about the shooting in Port El Kantawi at a beach resort?
This was, I think, this was a really certainly for the British people. This was a really alarming terror attack. What happened? There was a lone gunman who wandered down to the beach and basically started picking off tourists. He was, just with a rifle, and he managed to shoot about 38 people. I can't recall the number of people who were injured, but certainly the figure 38 victims is something that sticks in the mind. This was at the height of the sort of the terror regime of ISIS, and it also followed on from an attack in March in the Bardo Museum in Tunisia, where 25 tourists of different nationalities, including Japanese tourists, were shot by two gunmen inside the museum. And in fact, I visited the Bardo, and still to this day, they have left the bullet, where the bullets had entered the glass vitrines, display cases. They've actually left things as were, as a sort of memorial, and there's a memorial outside the Bardo Museum in honour of the victims of that attack. So what sort of mounted and added to this was that there were further attacks, such as the Nice terror attack, where a lorry ploughed through people, and unfortunately the driver was Tunisian. And there was also, with the rise of ISIS, the Islamic State in Syria and in Iraq, that sadly the situation was that there were about 7,000 foreign fighters were Tunisian. So it really was a very, very grim time for Tunisia. It really marks the country out as being in the public mind, and also in Tunisia at home, that this threat of Islamic extremism really was a shadow over the country, and there's real fear. I started working in Tunisia in 2016, and that sense of threat of extremist Islamist, different factions of Islamic extremist terrorism was palpable. When I was there, there was an invasion by an Islamic terrorist group into southern Tunisia in the Battle of Ben Gadan, where they actually took hold of that city for a few hours of the day before the National Guard forces and army actually beat them back. So it it's not just about that one case. It's this cluster of events that
Yeah.
really had a genuinely oppressive feel for the British people. It was an incredible shock because the people who would come on holiday to Tunisia, they were very loyal tourists. They were people who would go every year. They had built up friendships with local people. They would go back and hang out with their friends.
Mm.
So there was a real heartache for people who were particularly regular visitors to Sousse.
Yeah.
But
Horrible
also
incident.
really horrible incident. One of
Yeah.
one of the things that came out of it was, one of the big problems was the lack of response from the Tunisian police. It took them 40 minutes to respond to the terror attack. And one of the outcomes has been a very concerted effort by the British police, the British government, and also the European Union to really invest in training Tunisian police, and they
Yeah.
have built up elite counter-terrorism squads who are actually really quite well respected.
And unfortunately, we have to end it on such a sad note for our North Africa rep today. And at least, I don't know if you can even say that, when lives have been lost, something did come out of it. As you say, the Tunisian police receiving training from the UK side
Yes,
in handling these kind of
that has,
situations better.
and that has created real change,
Right.
and really reduced the terror threat in Tunisia.
Well, Elizia, we'll leave it there for today. And thanks again for joining us. I hope you have a great weekend.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much. Elizia Volkmann, a journalist in Tunisia there who covers the North and Sahel region. It's 32 minutes past 6 Central African time. Good morning to Jolani Tulongwepe.